at least module 1 that I will be taking, is dealing with the 2D drawings and their representation and the sort of rendering techniques that you can use for that. So I'll give a basic introduction to Photoshop itself, because I am not sure if everyone is extremely familiar with it. I'll talk about the basic tools and the palettes and the options that you can use. And then I will try to do a demo with a drawing that I have. And meanwhile, you can, while even I'm giving the demo, feel free to ask doubts, so that maybe I can address it in the demo itself. And once I'm done with that, maybe we can have a discussion with all of you regarding your particular drawings and how they can be represented well. And you guys would be free to basically go and work on your drawings. Is that all right?
Yes. Sakshi, you can present. Be a little brief and quick. Just explain what the project is and what the program is.
Yeah, so basically the project in concern is the project that we did for our study tour in November 2019 to Jodhpur, Rajasthan. This was a study tour which was the primary focus for the third year students. The overall understanding of the same is understanding the urban fabric of the place along with the water architecture developed around the same. We went about it starting with pre-workshops that clarified street mapping for us better. We then traveled and studied the place in concern for 3 days. The place in question being the Gulab Sagar waters and the precinct formed around it, just outside the fort walls of Jodhpur. During our time there, we conducted surveys, analyzed living patterns, street patterns, cultural context, and identified the reason behind the neglect of Gulab Sagar. We also found important to realize maps on the basis of built and unbuilt spaces, road networks, age of such structures, height of the same, functional typology, social interaction hotspots, physical infrastructure, and vegetation. We also did a sensory mapping, which formed the threads that built the said fabric in place. We also studied some houses in detail so as to understand typology, division and location of spaces, materiality, common construction practices, social relevance in a bigger fabric, and lifestyle of the users. We then got back to Mumbai and read over some material and looked into the history of the same. Then we divided the class in 5 sects and studied different cardinal zones of the precinct in detail in terms of its drawings, its activities, and prominent factors. This is also when we tabulated the surveys and figured out the needs of the space. After this, we split for individual work and considering the urban fabric of the place while keeping its socio-historic factors in mind, eliminated structures that weren't of utmost importance to the history, tourism, function, and lifestyle of the people and designed in place of them. All of this was based on the amenities identified in the survey. We went ahead to do some user space analysis to form the basis of our design and coupled it with climatic analysis, lifestyle, and existing features, which were then juxtaposed with the probable solution and aspirations for the place. The project essentially focused on the historic factor of the precinct and water architecture dominant around the precinct.
I'll just brief you about what the second year project is.
Okay.
So basically, the second years have also studied the same site, whatever third years have studied, and they have chosen only one part of it. Like they've taken one corner in the entire site, where is a it is a 4 road junction, where they wanted to design a pier. So it is a similar project. And over the time when they were in Jodhpur, they studied the Jalra, and they studied the style of architecture in that particular place. They studied about different materials and all these things. But ultimately, after coming back from the site was from the tour, they've studied. They've taken only one small area where there is an existing water. That pier and drinking water facility. They try to construct a pier in the same place, basically.
So our project is linked with the work which we did in allied design, and where we had to study existing PIA over here. So and overcome those aspects, we need to design as per the requirements for local people in the Rajasthan, and considering the climate conditions, and we have a plow over here. So actually we have a 10 meter over here, like 10 meter over here, and 9 meter over here, like left hand side, and this corner is for to construct a plow.
So this central water body, this central part is where the water body is, and this is just adjoining it where the stepped water body is. So that's the piao that they are referring to. It is just adjoining the water body. There is a street network all around, some buildings which immediately surround the water body, and other mostly houses and some small shops which are there in the surrounding area. The second year have taken a prominent junction at this place, wherein they will be developing uh, a kind of a monument for the water, which is the Pyao. And the third year have multiple uh, sites all around this Pyao. So some of them have it here, some of them have the waterfront, which will be used, which will be shown by them individually. So this is just so that you have an idea of where it is located. So I hope this was like a very brief, rough idea of the context in which they are working. So because you are going to be working with the context of the site,
Right.
and
Okay.
so I thought you should have an idea about it. So we can begin with your presentation.
All right. So just so that I understand briefly, the second year is doing the Piao, which is at the junction, the crossroads, which I saw. And then the third years are working on, I think, like residences, but at multiple site locations, right?
So it's residence plus a small institute building.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Some sort of a skill institute or something. Okay.
So it's
All right.
all different sort of structures. That's religious spaces, community spaces, residential spaces, offices, and shops and everything. So like all the structures that are adjoining the water body, we're working on those.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
you are maybe essentially keeping the same function that is currently existing and then redesigning the same structure.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
That along with the needs that we identified in the survey conducted
Right.
there.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. How many of you have had experience working with Photoshop already? Not a lot of you? Okay. All right. That's fine. So we'll start with scratch then. That's fine. So you guys must be aware of the concept of collages, right? You must have done collage in like school, like while working with arts and crafts and all of that, right?
Yes.
If I can just have one of you, maybe someone that I can see on the screen, Devanshi Saila, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if you have to, let's say, create a collage of you standing in front of the Taj Mahal at sunset, all right? And I give you all of these images. Of course, you have pictures of yourself, right? You have multiple pictures of the Taj Mahal, and then you have multiple pictures of, let's say, sunsets, right? If you had to create a collage, okay, on an artboard in front of you, how would you proceed? How will you start?
I think we can use the clipping mask tool and then creating layers and
No, no,
then
no. Don't tell me about Photoshop. Tell me if you had physical pictures
yeah.
in front of you, how would you make a collage?
Mm, probably like tear the pieces and like join them in a specific pattern or then
Right. Okay.
overlap things.
Overlap things, right? So
Yeah.
basically, if you understand that it's the picture of Taj Mahal at evening, right? And you have multiple pictures, let's say, of sunsets, right? So essentially, I think the logic would go that you will place the sunset picture first, right? Because it's right at the bottom. and then maybe you'll cut out very closely a picture of the Taj Mahal, and then you will place it on top of the sunset picture, right? So that it looks like it's the Taj Mahal at sunset, and then eventually, finally, you will put out a picture of yourself and put it on top where you want the placement to be, right? Does that make sense? So essentially, Photoshop works on the same concept, which is the concept of layers. All right. So if you have a basic understanding of how you create a collage, you'll be able to work with Photoshop. You just need to know what tools enable you to do the same things that you would do with, let's say, glue and scissor and pieces of paper, right? So what I will start doing is I will start sharing my screen and I'll show you the basic layout of Photoshop. Okay. So I'll just introduce you to the various parts of Photoshop. All right. So there's a little issue that I'm seeing that the bar on top is blinking. So I don't know if you guys can see that clearly. But so on basically the left of the screen, you have the tool palette, all right, which has your most basic tools or the most commonly used tools, which you will have, which is this thin palette on the side on the left, all right. On the right hand side, you have your windows, all right. So you have a layer window. All of these are movable, by the way, so you can take one and move it to any other tab. That you want to basically have. But this is generally the sort of setup that you will get. You will have swatches and style and things like that on top. All right. You would have something like a history window in the middle, and then you would have layers tab or window at the bottom. Now, this is the most important sort of window that you must always be aware of, because the layer that is selected is the layer that you will be working on. Okay, so think of layers as these slices that you are creating your collage out of, right? So the layer which is right at the bottom will be the layer which will be seen through from the layers on top. All right. So you can add more layers to it. So right now you can see it just says layer one because it is showing you this particular drawing which is there on my screen right now. And that's the only layer which exists. You will see the checkerboard pattern which is there behind. Now that actually doesn't mean that there is a checkerboard there. It means that there is nothing there, or there is an absence of information, and only the black parts exist on this on the image right now. All right. Just to kind of illustrate that, I'm going to add a new layer by clicking Add Layer here. Okay, and I'm going to call this background. All right. Now you can see that there is also a checkerboard sort of thing because there is no information on it, and it is on top of layer one. All right. So I'm going to do one thing right now. I'm just going to fill it with information. I'm just going to, so you can go to it and you can say fill. Otherwise, you can also press Shift F5. It basically helps you fill any information into any particular part of your workspace. Um, but we'll come to that in detail later. But just to illustrate my point, I'm doing this. I'm going to fill it with white. All right. So you can see that the entire screen has become white, and the reason why that is basically my background layer is on top of layer one. All right. So if I just click it and drag it and move it down, uh, the background layer has now gone behind the layer one. Right. So I'm just going to quickly rename layer one as my drawing layer. Right. So you see this little eye next to the thumbnail. That's basically for visibility. I can turn it off, so it's gone, and it comes back. Right. I can do the same with the background, and it goes back to checkerboard because it means there is no information behind this. Right. All right. So by moving these layers back and forth, you can decide um, what is coming on top and what is going to be seen behind. This is going to be extremely important when you are actually working on drawings with multiple layers, because things keep getting hidden behind or overlapped by other things. All right. Um, okay. I hope you guys have understood so far. Someone can just unmute themselves and say yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. So I'm just going to go through the tool palette now quickly. So so at least for this session, I don't want to overload you with too much information. So I'll stick to things that you might require or might need just now to work with um, your first set of drawings. And of course, if you have any doubts, you can ask me. But at least just for now, we'll go through these tools very quickly. So I'm going to do one thing. I'm just going to open up another file in case I want to. So I'll just open up this picture from Qutub Minar, and I'm just going to drag it into the window. All right, and I'm going to take it to the tab on top so that it opens up as a new tab. If you drop it in this drawing, it would open up in this drawing itself, but I wanted it to be a separate. So you can see these tabs, so it can help you toggle between two separate drawings. Okay, I'm going to come back to this. This will remain open in case we need to work with that. All right. So the move tool, which is right on top, you can see that there's a little move icon next to it, which you might recognize from other softwares as well. So it helps you basically move things around. All right. So whenever a tool is selected, so first of all, you can right click any tool and it gives you more options under that tool, right? For example, this is a select tool which helps you select rectangular spaces. But if I right click, I can also select elliptical or circular, and then thin slices of any image. Um, I'm just going to select the move tool again. All right. I'm going to click and move something on the screen right now. If you can see, it's moving the white background, right? And the reason why that is that my background layer was selected. All right. So you have to be extremely aware of what layer is selected, because sometimes you accidentally end up making changes to a layer and you don't see it until much later because it was in the back and you might have deleted some things and all of that. So it's very important to know what layer is selected. So I'll select my drawing layer again and I'll move that around. Right. So this helps you move individual slices. All right. This is the select um, option tool, which helps you select a portion, any portion of the screen. And you can actually, I just press delete right now. So it deleted a portion of the screen, right? This is the Lasso tool. All right. It helps you do the same sort of selection, but it gives you more options. So you can create polygonal selections. So if it's not a regular shape, you can make selections like that. All right. Now, wand tool is something that's going to come in very handy. Okay, I'm just going to deselect this. All right. So, all right. So we were basically talking about the magic wand tool, right? So, yeah, you can see in the history that I've did a lot of changes to it, and I came back. All right. So the way the magic wand tool basically works is that, and it's called magic wand because it actually works like that. It automatically does a lot of things for you, which will come in very handy, especially when you're uh, working with images where you have to uh, layer things and then. Okay, so I'll just quickly get to this. So whenever you basically select a tool, all right, you can right click it so that gives you more options. And on top is where you can see the parameters that the tool is choosing, right? So right now you can see there's this thing called as tolerance, which is set to 50 right now. So if I take the wand tool and I select anywhere on the image, you can see it has automatically selected a big chunk of the sky. The reason why it has done that is because all of this information seems the same to the tool, right? Because it's all blue. All right. If I reduce this to, let's say, 5, it will select a much smaller area, right? So it depends on what kind of selection or how sensitive you want this tool to be, that you can change this parameter. So let's say I take it back and I take it to 40, it selects more of the area. If I press down on shift and keep selecting, I can actually select the entire sky, and let's say I press delete and I replace it with white, right? So these sort of this sort of comes in very handy when you have a lot of very similar information that you want to get rid of, like the sky, for example, like a wall or something like that, and replace it with something else or just the background. It can help you do that. So what happens in a drawing? Okay, I've zoomed into this particular part of this section, and I'll zoom out just to show you. So, like we discussed earlier, there's absolutely no information on this drawing layer other than these lines which are drawn. Everything else in the middle is basically transparent, right? So whenever you click on a layer with a magic wand tool like that, what happens is that it selects the lack of information which is there between lines, right? So especially in drawing, so I'll zoom in again. So you can see that there are these thin elevation lines which are drawn, right? So it actually selects this area which is there between that. So if you worked on CAD, you understand it very similar to the way hatch works, right? So when you hatch a particular area, you have to make sure that it is closed from all of the sides. Otherwise, the hatch flows out, right, and it covers the entire area. So that's basically how it works with this as well. So if you want a particular area to be filled with a certain color or pattern or texture, make sure that it is uh, closed from all sides. If it is not, we can work on it in Photoshop itself and close it. I'll show you that a little later. All right, let me just go through the rest of the tools quickly, and then we'll come back to basically how we can work on this particular file. All right, this is the crop tool. I'm sure you already all know what cropping is, right? It helps you basically um, resize the image down to a certain size. So if I select the crop tool and I select a portion of this image, it gives me this window and tells me, do you want to crop? So everything else other than this particular window will go away. If I click on this check sign on top, all right, let me just do that. So you can see it's all gone. I'll undo this. All right, this is a color pickup, which you might remember from other softwares as well. And it does what its name is exactly, which is that it helps you pick color. So if I click, let me remove the selection. If I click on this part of the image, okay, if you see the bottom left is where this color has been selected, right? So if I keep clicking on various parts of the image, that color keeps changing. All right. There are two swatches here. The one on top is your foreground color, and the one on the bottom is your background color. We'll talk about that later. Just kind of remember those terms. This is the spot healing brush. This can help you remove very tiny blemishes. Maybe you can use that to edit your selfies, to remove pimples and scars and stuff like that. So the way it basically works is that it will take any uh, part of your image, and if there's a small little discoloration or color change, if you click on it, it basically removes it. I don't think I need to show you that right now because I don't think you will need it. But of course, please feel free to play around in Photoshop and just see what these things can do. You can probably open up a picture of yourself and try the spot healing brush and yeah, work on your selfies. This is the brush tool. All right, it's again what its name suggests. It that actually helps you draw things. So again, like when I select the brush tool, I get all of these options on top, right? So the kind of brush it is, what is the size of the brush, right? So increasing the size increases the, you see this little circle on the screen? That's the width of my brush. So if I increase it, that circle becomes bigger, right? And the hardness, I'll just show you what the hardness does. So we earlier chose this color, right? This particular brown from this image using the color picker. So that has become the color of my brush right now. So let's say I increase the brush size, all right? And what I will do is I will basically just draw on top, right? So you can see the difference. So I'm just going to change the hardness and I'll increase it to 100% and I'll draw another line. Do you see the difference between the two lines? So the hardness basically defines what your edge of the brush will do, right? So again, if you right click this, you can see other options like a pencil tool and all of that. So brush can come in handy when you actually want to draw certain information directly onto the drawing, right? Now, just to illustrate quickly, I select the wand tool and I'll select this area which is below the drawing, okay? Now, do you see this marching at selection has come all over the screen? It's because all of this area, which is below my drawing and above my drawing and everything, is one single area, right? But let's say I want to draw the ground. I want to like fill that with a dark color or like a brown or something like that. I will need to close this off. Like I said earlier, right? That the wand tool only helps you select things which are enclosed within lines. So I can actually take the brush tool or I can take a pencil tool. I'll increase it to, let's say, a 10 so that you can see it. Okay, I'm on my drawing layer, which means that whatever I draw will come on my drawing layer. I'll deselect this, otherwise it will not draw. It only draws in the area which is selected, or if it is deselected, then it can remove the entire canvas. All right. So I'm going to use this pencil. I'm going to click here. This is a neat trick which can come in handy. If you press Shift and click on any other part of the screen, it will automatically draw a straight line to those 2 points, joining those 2 points, right? I'll undo that. Let me change the color to a black. What I did is basically I clicked on the color and this color picker popped up and I can choose the various colors. I'm just going to take black for now. All right. And I'm going to draw directly onto the screen. Right? My lines are not very clean right now. Please excuse me for that. So now this drawing has actually been enclosed. I can show you by clicking on wand. And if you select it, now it's only showing you this particular space, right? All right. We'll work on that a little later. This is the clone stamp. Um, this is a very interesting tool to work on when you are working with 3D collages and things like that, because it helps you clone one part of the image onto another. I won't get into it today because we'll work on that with our second and third module where we work with images. You don't need it right now, so let's not confuse ourselves. History brush eraser. Okay. Now this is basically what it sounds like. It helps you erase things, right? My drawing layer is selected. I can the eraser options are on top, which means I can select the size of the eraser. You can also change the shape of the eraser, by the way, by choosing other brushes. So your eraser is also a brush. So I'm just going to increase the size. So you can see that if I click and drag, it actually erases parts of the image, right? Undo all of this. So one way of undoing is, so if you see this part of the screen, which is your history tab, when you undo something, it only goes back one step, right? It will not do it any further. If I undo and undo, it comes back, right? I just did Control Z. It removed the erase that I did. But when I click Control Z again, it comes back. So it keeps toggling between the last two options. I can actually look at my history and see all of the recent commands that are given. And I can actually go back. Let's say I want to go back to uh, I had not erased these three parts of the image. I'll just click on this particular time and it goes back to this. There is a limit to how far you can go back, right? I had used all of this. I had made these lines in pencil, right? I can go back to that as well. And I can come back again with all of those. There is a limit to how far this can go. So please be very careful in Photoshop because you will not be able to keep doing the way you do in, right? In CAD, you can keep doing Control Z and it keeps going back to all the changes you made. That's not what happens in Photoshop. There is a set limit to this. All right. This is the tool, the next tool, which is the Paint Bucket tool. You might remember it from Paint as well, right? The default Windows Paint. So again, you can see that my black color is selected. So if I just go into the file and I just click, it will fill this entire area with black. All right. I'll undo this. You can also fill it with a gradient. Okay, and it gives me the option of the gradient on top, right? So I can, let's say I select this gradient. And you can see there are other options here, like what is the type of gradient? Is it a standard linear gradient, which is something like this? I'm just clicking and dragging, right? It's applied to the entire image because I didn't specify the selection, right? So my entire image has a gradient now. I'll deselect that and take my wand tool, click on this again. Now only this particular part of the ground is selected. I'll take my gradient again and I'll go from top to bottom now. So that's the sort of gradient I get, right? I'll undo this. With other different options, you can play around, play around, and with the circular gradient, you'll get something like this, right? With this sort of a gradient, you'll get something like this, right? I'll undo this as well. These remaining options again are something that will not be particularly helpful now. There is the zoom tool which I've been using, but of course that also works with pressing Z, and you can draw a window around a part of your image, and it will zoom into that. If you press down on the Alt key, it becomes a minus, which means zoom out. You can zoom out like that. All right. There's also a text option that you get here. All right. I am not a big fan of using text in Photoshop. All right. Because all of your outputs from Photoshop becomes raster images. They become photographs, basically. They become like images. So if you put any text on this, right? Like for example, in the drawing that I imported, there are these dimensions, right? Now it says 7,000 and 3,000. So that's because I had done the annotation on CAD, and when I exported it, it exported as a image, right? So there is no way that I can edit this particular information, right? Because it's treating it as a image. So if I select my eraser, you can see that it can partially delete it as well. So it Photoshop, it's just a bunch of pixels, right? And particularly with text and information, you might want to go back and edit it later. So I prefer not putting any sort of annotation on my images in Photoshop. I will work on the basic right, that I intend to do. And then what I will do is that I will export it and then do the annotation and labeling and uh, text and all of that in InDesign, which will be the last module that we study on day 3. All right. Okay, so this is the basic tools. When you hover over a tool, it tells you what it is, right? So it tells you move tool. So you can actually figure out what that tool is. If you forgot it, you can actually figure out by hovering over it. It will tell you exactly um, what that particular tool is. All right. So I'm going to give you a very basic sort of because I have this particular drawing available to me. I'm going to give you a very basic sort of introduction on how this is just about the techniques right now, and you guys can obviously use your own style to do this. I'm just telling you the techniques of how you can particularly do this, right? So let's say I have this one section, right? Uh, and I also have an elevation at the bottom, all right? So I'm just going to show you how you fill colors and render this image, okay? And it will not look very pretty because what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to show you the options. तो मैं बहुत सारे colors, बहुत सारे gradients, बहुत सारे textures डालने वाला हूँ, which of course is not something you should do. You should create a particular style with it and work with that. Just for the sake of this demo, I'm going to do that. So, okay, let me zoom into a part, Z for zoom into a part of the image. All right, and I'm going to select the interior. So this is a section of a warehouse. It's the APMC uh, market in Vashi. All right, and this is the section of a warehouse where this is a central corridor through which people pass. Okay, these are the shops on either sides where people can actually buy things from. And behind the shops is this entire warehouse, which is the storage for the shop, where people where they store things and sell from. And there is actually a loading, unloading dock, or rather, um, loading, unloading plinth at the back, right? So a truck is there at the back from which you can directly unload into the warehouse, just so that you understand this image. All right. So yeah, all right. So I am just going to select a portion of this image. Okay, I am working on my drawing file, right? The background layer is not selected. And if I select this portion of the image, I can fill it with a certain color. All right. So obviously, when I'm filling all of these colors and all that, I don't want to do it on my drawing layer, right? Because if I make a mistake or if I want to change anything, if I put all of these colors and information on the drawing layer itself, later it will be very difficult to edit it. It might actually ruin the drawing itself, right? So I will create a new layer, which is by pressing this icon at the bottom. See, it says create a new layer. When I click on that, it gives me a new layer. It's a very intelligent thing to name all of your layers. It's something that even I don't do. A lot of professionals don't do because we are too confident, too full of ourselves. But it's a very good habit to start doing that because when you work with images which are, at some point it can get as big as like 20, 30, 50 layers, especially in an image where you insert a lot of props. So it becomes very difficult to later find what layer a certain object is on, right? So I'm just going to name this to passage, okay? And the way, so now since this particular part is selected, and this is a new layer, I can start filling it with information. I can do a lot of things. I can take a brush, I'll change the color. and I can start painting into it, right? Uh, I can increase the brush size and paint it all in one go as well. Let me undo this. Um, but I can also directly go into edit, say fill, and I can choose the color that I want to fill it with. I can, since I'd already selected the yellow, it's become my foreground color, right? So if I say foreground color and I say OK, it has filled it with the yellow which was on top. If I say, let me do Shift F5, that's the shortcut. If I say background color, you see this little pink which is at the back, it will fill it with that. Okay. I can also fill it with any other color of my choice, right? So I can go into a swatch and let's say I fill it with a blue, right? When you are rendering, um, especially in architecture, you have two options. One is to render symbolically, and the other is to render using actual colors or realistic representation, right? So, for example, in this particular image, when I had made this image for my studio in college, what I try to do is that I try to show within this section the degree of publicness. All right. So what one can do is that one can actually choose a color to show what is the most public area and what is the least public area. Like, for example, the passage in the middle is where people can generally move around, right? So that is the most public area. You can choose a color like, let's say, blue for it. And then the shops which are outside the passages, just on the either sides of the passage, are semi-private because that is where the interaction of the public and the shopkeeper happens. And then the warehouse is completely private. Normal people are not, the customers are not able to access those areas. So I can actually choose a gradient of, let's say, light blue to dark blue to show the degree of privateness, right? So I've selected this passage layer, which is why this particular blue is here. I'll deselect this. I'll go back to my drawing. So if I forget to do that, and if I W is a shortcut for the wand tool. You might want to remember that. You'll use it often. So if I select it without being on my drawing layer, you see what has happened. It has selected all of this area other than the blue patch in my passage layer, right? I can turn this off to show you where the passage layer is. So you want to remember to basically be on the layer that you are constantly working on. So I am back to my drawing layer and I'm going to select these spaces, right? You can shift press them so that you can select multiple, since there's a line here which is an elevation line and I don't want to make any different changes. So again, I will go to edit and fill or shift F5 and I'll choose this color, but I'll make it darker, right? Because I'm trying to show that there is a change in the degree of publicness. And I say OK, and it has, okay, so obviously I made a mistake right now. I have put this on my drawing layer. So if I change the visibility, I can see that the blue has actually gone onto my drawing layer. I don't want that. I'll go back using my history command or other history window to the selection that I had made, and I will make another new layer for it, and I'll say shop, right? And now I'll shift F5. It's still selected. The previous color is still selected, and it has filled it. All right. If you notice, my drawing layer has actually gone to the bottom, but it doesn't seem like that because I have been selecting inside the lines, right? But if I move my drawing layer on top, you can see that the black elevation line has become more prominent. You always want your drawing layer to be on top so that the outlines are clearly visible, and it's just good practice. All right. I'm going to add another layer So whenever you select a layer and you say new layer, it always adds the layer on top of that layer. All right. I'm going to make this warehouse. Okay. And I'll go back to my drawing layer. I'm selecting my drawing layer. Let me just zoom out a little so that I can see both warehouses at the same time. All right. Um, I'm on the drawing layer, so I can use the wand tool and select Shift, select all of these 4 spaces. Now I'll go to the warehouse layer, Shift F5, and I'll fill it with a even darker color, right? You can obviously use the color picker tool to later check what these colors are, and if you want to use it, let's say in another image, you can do that. So just a quick introduction to the color picker. It shows you the gradient, the entire gradient here, and you can select the various hues and shades of that particular color, uh, shades and tints of that particular color. So I'll select this and I'll go to a darker color. So on the side, there are 2 important things, the RGB and the CMYK. All right. Let me give a quick introduction to what RGB and CMYK is, because it's going to be a little important. It's very professional information, but I think you guys should know this. So RGB and CMYK are 2 different color formats. All right. And these are used to basically specify color when you are working on a certain image. Now, the way RGB works is, which is the red, green, blue format or system of coloring, is that it gives you a ratio of how much of red, green, and blue is in that particular color, right? So if it's this particular blue, then RA value is 56, green value is 117, and blue value is 185, right? And the same color in the CMYK system, it shows you the cyan value, which is 80%, the magenta value, which is 51%, yellow value, which is 1%, and K value, which is black value, which is 0. Okay, one very important thing to understand the difference between these two is that RGB is used for screens. All right, because I mean, if you put your eyes right up against your screens right now, and I'm sure you've done this as a kid with your television sets, you understand that your screen is made up of 3 very tiny pixels which show red, green, and blue, right? I'm sure you must have noticed it. So even in your projectors, you must have seen there are 3 bulbs which are projecting red, green, and blue, right? And that's how they make all of these colors which are visible. So whenever you are working on something which is only going to be viewed on a screen, you use a RGB system. Whenever you are working on something which is going to be printed, then you should use a CMYK system to specify the colors. Because CMYK stands for the colors or the inks which are there in the printers. So you'll get a more accurate representation of visual colors versus colors on the screen. This is just an introduction. You can ask me in detail about this later. This is just so that you know this. I've selected that color, and now I have that on the screen as well. I don't think it's much of a difference. Let me increase it further. Okay, right. So this is basically how you render with flat colors. All right. I'm going to use a gradient for the ground. All right. So I'm going to choose. I'll go back to my drawing layer, and I'm going to choose this particular patch which we had drawn earlier. All right. And I'm going to fill it with a gradient. All right. So these are the various gradients that are available to me. I can actually uh, double click and it will give me an option as well where I can change the gradient from what color to what color I want. Generally, what I do is I will take color that I want the gradient to be. My color picker, let's say I take a deep brown, all right, and I will choose this option, all right. You can see what it is basically it's showing me brown to the checkered pattern. And since we know that checkered pattern basically means transparent or lack of information, when I pick that and I'm choosing this linear gradient, when I fill it with this, let me go in the other direction. It gives me a gradient filling the brown and going to invisible, slightly grading downwards. You can see it's a little lighter than the color that I wanted. And the reason is because my opacity is set at 63. Let me do it again. I'll undo this. I'm going to increase my opacity to 100% and I'll make the gradient again. Right? Again, it's on my drawing layer. I don't want that. I will create a new layer and say ground. If I press down on my shift key, it will create a straight line. Right? And that's basically how you get a gradient. Right? Now, let's say I want to add a sort of sky or maybe just a graphic element basically to the back of this image because I want there to be some contrast against the white which is there, right? And I'm going to zoom out. Okay, let's say I basically I'll be the elliptical marquee tool, the selection tool, and I'm going to create a circle. All right, I'll make a new layer, call it circle. Since my interiors are blue, I'm going to choose a warmer color for this and shift F5 and I'll fill it with the color. All right. So do you see what has happened? So I've created a circle. All right. And right now that circle is between my drawing layer and my ground layer. All right. So you can see that the circle is still behind my drawing, but it is now on top of all of the other layers that we made. I'm just going to move it, click and drag it at the bottom and add it just above the background. Right. And I can select the move tool and I can actually move this around independently. Right. I could have also made a rectangular sort of a thing. I could have done any other shape if I wanted to. In this particular image, when I was working on it earlier, which you might have seen in Pulkit sir's presentation, I had actually shown the quality of light which comes in on the top level, right? So I'm just going to quickly do that just so that you understand. So I want it to be above my warehouse layer, so I'll create a new layer here, and I'll say light. Okay, I'll zoom into this part. So I'll use the polygon selection tool, which I had shown earlier. And I'm just going to create a box to show how much the light penetrates inside the warehouse on top, right? So I'll just do that. Okay. So I've made this sort of a triangle to show the shape of the light which is coming in. And I want to fill it with the same sort of orange in a gradient. So orange is selected. And I'll go to my gradient tool. And I'll fit into that space. Right? Since it's a separate layer, it's above my warehouse. So you can use it to basically do such sort of a rendering which um, is showing you symbolic information as well. It can be realistic as well, like if you want to actually show the actual interiors of a certain space, you can use that as well. I'm going to use a couple of things now, which I'm going to bring in from the folder that I have. I think you guys have been given the files that I sent to you, which are basically the cutouts that I had made. There are certain sort of starter kit that I had given you, right? Which has these cutouts. So I'm going to go into that folder. And so these are basically the files that I keep ready because I've been working for quite a few years with Photoshop. I have a bank of these cutouts ready, which I've provided to you guys as well. You guys can make your own cutouts to use in these images. I'm just going to randomly just drop these so that you understand how to work with them. So within Photoshop, if you want to add a file or a part of the image into your drawing, there are multiple ways to do it. So one way is to basically, I can, let's say, drag this particular tree into Photoshop. You can see that it's a tree with no background information. I'll tell you how to create an image like that after this. But let's say I select this tree, or I can actually control and press on this layer, click on this layer, control and click. So it actually selects just the information which is there in that layer. Control C and Control V into your file. All right, and it's given me the tree. Fortunately for me, the tree is roughly the size that I want my tree to be. So I don't have to resize, but otherwise pressing Control T, which is for transform, or also you can find it under edit. I get this transformation box and I can use it to resize this. One thing you should understand is that if you drag your image into your Photoshop file, the size that it shows originally is the size that it should be. It can be smaller than that, it can't be bigger. So when I pasted it, I'll go back to this. When I pasted it, it was this size, right? So if I increase it to a much bigger size than this, it will start pixelating when you print it, or when you project it, or when you zoom into it. So I'm just going to keep it here. You can see that this layer has been green. One important thing that you should understand here is that you copy things into Photoshop, it becomes a part of this image, right? So you can see that it looks like just like all the other layers. I'm going to, just for the sake of explanation, drag the same tree directly into this file. Okay. Slightly bigger. Okay. You see there is a difference here. Now this particular layer has a different name, and that name is actually the name of the file, and it has this icon. Now what this particular icon next to the layer means is that it's a smart object, which means that no matter what size you make it to, I can make it tiny and I can make it big, it will retain the quality. All right, but that will not happen with a copy pasted object like this. I go to tree. I'm going to resize this to very tiny. I'll say OK, and I'll resize it back. You see what's happened? So it's pixelated because when you made it smaller, Photoshop decided to let go of all of that information. And now you can see there is a difference in quality, right? So as much as possible, always keep your cutouts ready, create them in a separate file, and then drag and drop them into Photoshop. Otherwise, you will see this sort of a difference when you work with your file. I'm going to delete the original tree layer by clicking on this trash can next to the layer. I'm going to keep this tree. I'll move it here. Control D to resize. Press down on Shift. It resizes
Kamlesh
it.
sir, there is a slight disturbance in the voice. So I'll request the others, we can try putting our videos off. So maybe the quality of the audio will improve.
Okay.
Everyone can put your videos off, but remain attentive. Thank you. Yeah, we can start. Sorry for the
All right.
interruption.
All right. Um, Again, just to revise what I just said because of the disturbance. Okay. So ideally, I want you to keep your cutouts ready or work on them on a separate file and then drag and drop them into Photoshop so that the quality is maintained no matter how much you resize it. All right, that's just a basic gist of what I wanted to say. I can also bring in other cutouts out of, let's say, a person. Resize this so that it fits. Okay. So
Sir,
when I'm, yeah,
how to copy the multiple files?
how to copy multiple files. Can you be a little more clear on what you want to know?
Like how to copy, if we have one tree, then how can I copy it multiple times, again
Oh,
and again, other than
all right. Okay. I'll tell you that. Let me just move this person into place first. So I want to move him right on top in the layer so that it doesn't hide behind the blue. I'm going to move him here and I'm going to resize him so that he's the correct size. Okay. How do you, so basically you want to know how to duplicate it, right? So this is the tree file, right? The tree layer. I can do this, I can say duplicate layer. So it has doubled it and I can move the extra copy out and move it to the location. Another thing that you can do actually is when the layer is selected, uh, press Control and click and drag. Wait, sorry, not Control then. Alt, sorry about that. So when you select a certain layer, okay, with my move tool, I'll press down Alt, okay, click and drag, it makes a copy automatically. See, it's made a copy here, right? So you can use either of those. You can duplicate the layer, or you can press Alt and move it, so it will move a copy of the original layer. Did that solve your doubt?
yes, sir.
All right. I'm going to delete this extra tree. Okay. Um, Now, quickly, I will tell you how to create such cutouts. Okay. You can actually create from the files that you have, right? So, if you have taken site photograph of people in Rajasthan, and of course, they have a very specific way of dressing and the way they look, and you want to retain that flavor into your drawing. So, you can take an image that you have, a photograph that you have, a person is very clearly visible, and you can edit, all right, or you can download them off the internet. There are various websites which offer free cutouts. Okay, there is one which I recently used, which was called mrcutout.com, um, but and it has some set of free cutouts that you can take. Otherwise, you can make your own. Otherwise, you can find other websites. These are the sort of cutouts that I have ready. All right. I have already kept them ready with um, as in as cutouts without the background information. Okay, but I have one file where it's not. Wait, let me just find that. Yes, this one. Okay, so you can see that I have this JPEG file, which is a tree, cut out of a tree. Okay, I'm just going to close the extra tabs on this one, which I don't need. And I'm going to drag and open this into a new tab. All right. Okay. So this is a very simple image because already the background is white. All right. So I don't have to do much work. But of course, if you take side photographs, then there will be a lot of background noise. But we can work with that as well. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of all of this white, right? Because if I drag this into my, let me do that and show you. If I drag this into my section file, I'll actually get it with the background. You see that? It comes with the white, which I don't want. So I have to get rid of all of this white information, right? So first thing you should do is select this, Control C, Control V. All right. So I have made a copy. So I've made a new layer. And I'll go into my background and I'll fill the background. Actually, it doesn't matter what you fill it with. But for now, I filled it with a color so that I can see what I'm erasing. All right. Now I'm going to my top layer. All right. I'll take my magic wand, which is W, and I'll select all of this white. Right. And when I start deleting it, you can see that you can see the orange behind, which means my layer is becoming transparent. Another very easy way of doing this would have been actually is that I can go to select and say color range. Since it's a very simple image, I can actually select the white. So what it does is it selects all the white in this image. So even the ones in the middle, it has selected, and I'll just say delete and it's gone. All right. So when I'm saving this, what I'll do is I'll turn off my background so that it looks like a transparent image. File, save as.
Sir, can you
Yeah.
please repeat the black and white bit?
Oh, okay. Sorry. All right. I'll undo this. All right. So what I did was, there is this tool which helps you select a color range. All right. So it will select a set of colors which are there in the image. Okay. Let's say I select color range. Now what I am doing is I'm selecting. You see this color picker has come, right? I'm selecting this white. It's showing me black and white as what areas of the image it should select. So the black is something it will not select because that is green in the image and it's all different colors. But it will select the white. Let's say I'm using this color picker and click on green. Now you can see that it's showing me the green portion of this image. I'll select various greens and it will show me that, right? So it will actually select that portion. So I'll select white because I want to get rid of the white. So when I say OK, it has selected the white in the image, which if I delete now, all the white is gone from my layer on top, and then you can see the background behind, which I'll turn off. All right. So now my cutout is ready, and I can save it as a PNG file. Remember that PNG files are the ones which can retain transparent information. If you save it as a JPEG, it will automatically again make it white, and your mehnat will all be down the drain. So I'll select PNG, okay, and I'm gonna say palm trees. I'll save it. Okay. So you can see that this new file has come here, which is a PNG file. And just to explain, I'm going to drag and drop this here back. And you can see that it's a transparent image. I can bring it on top. I can move it around and it's a transparent image. I'll delete this. All right. So if you have any side photographs that you want to make into cutouts, um, I don't have one, for example, right now. But what I will do is I'll show you how to do a cutout. So let me take this image again. So imagine if instead of this building, there was a person, right, that you want to cut off, make a cutout of. If the background is plain and simple, it's very easy. Again, I'll Control C, Control V this file, and I'll turn off the background. So I can actually just use magic wand and delete the sky, right? And it will automatically get rid of it. But sometimes it's more complicated than that. You have a market scene or something like that, and it's not very easy to get rid of the information. You will use this lasso tool, the polygon lasso tool, and you can actually draw the shape of that person. Okay, and you can Control C, Control V. So you can see that I've actually created a small cutout like that. Okay, I'll zoom in. Delete this. You can zoom into the image so that you can be very specific about how you want to create this cutout. I'm just doing it to show you this. If I want this particular shape, I can Control C, Control V, turn those background layers off, and it's given me a very precise cutout, right? So I can actually use my site photographs to create cutouts of people from that particular location so that I can drag and drop them into my drawings. All right. I think I'm going to stop. Okay. Before I stop presenting, are there any doubts about what we just learned right now?
We have a question from Jeel.
Okay.
She is asking, can we change the quality of lines, like make them sketchy lines or brush lines? If you could help her with that.
Okay. Um, you can. There are options within Photoshop to do that, but they're not very good, honestly. I'm just going to select my drawing layer again. So if you see here under filter, are these types of filters, right? So there are these artistic filters like colored pencil, cutout, dry brush. Let me pick one. Let's say I pick brush strokes and I say angle strokes. Okay. So within this, I can actually choose various types of effects. But like I said, it's not a very reliable or good thing in Photoshop. So like this note paper gives you a different texture. Stamp will give you a different texture. So it has various such options. Since this is a black drawing, it's not making much of a change. Let me zoom into the tree actually. When you right click on the screen, it shows you what layers are there when you click it. So when I right click on the tree, it shows me that this tree is there and then there is a background also. So I'm going to select the tree so that my layer is automatically selected. And now I'll try a filter on it. Let's say I try a pixelate filter. I actually like this particular filter, but so this gives you like a newspaper print sort of a effect. Filter artistic, colored pencil. Now the window will come up again. So these are the sort of filters and all that you can try and play with. What I would suggest actually is that you try to, if you want those quality of lines, you should process them externally into something else. So you can process them in any other software. Generally, your exports from SketchUp give you that sort of a quality. Otherwise, you can use these filters to do that, or you can. Oh, actually, there's one thing I should explain. There's this thing called as blending options. All right. Now, this is very important. Please pay attention. It will come in handy a lot. So, in your layers window, I'll right click on my drawing. Let me zoom out a bit. I'll right click on my drawing and I'll say blending options. Okay. So, I can actually have a lot of options like drop shadow. So since I'm dropping a shadow on the drawing layer, I'll just increase this so that you can see it better. You see that I increase the distance. I'll increase the size of it. Of course, this is not looking good. But you can actually give these shadows to give sort of depth to your drawing. So if I actually apply to my human figures, or if I apply it to, let's say, the tree, I can get certain effects, some depth effects. You can play around with this to understand exactly what is spread, what is size, and what sort of effects you will get. Other very interesting options within this. One is the color overlay, which means that it will fill that particular layer with that color. So this tree layer, I'm going to turn the shadow off. Let's say I don't want a realistic tree. I want a tree which is graphical. I just want it to be a gray color tree in the background, right? So I'm not going to sit and paint a gray tree. Since I already have a cutout of a tree available, I'm just going to use color overlay on it. Okay, and it's automatically taken gray, but I can change it to any other color that I want, right? So it's actually removed the photograph information from the tree and just filled it with the color in the shape of that cutout, right? It's also available with gradient, right? I can use a lot of different types of gradient for it, and I could also color overlay it with white. Of course, that will make it disappear, but I can stroke it, which means it will just give it a outline. I can stroke it with a color. I can stroke it with green, right? So you can use blending options to do something to your entire layer. Okay. Maybe sometimes you'll realize that you want to put all of your trees in one layer and just give one blending option so that all of the trees have that same effect, right? Yeah, so those filters are there which you can actually use. Anything else? Do you think you guys are ready to work on your drawing files now? All right. So you guys have those cutouts which I have provided. You can use those cutouts. You can actually go online. You can actually, when you're Googling, you can say car for Photoshop or tree for Photoshop, and it will give you those kind of specific pictures which have either no background information or a plain white, so that it's easy to directly use it as cutouts in your drawings. You can use people. There are a lot of websites and like Google searches that you can do, which gives you ready uh, cutouts of Indian people as well. Please don't use done cutouts because it makes your drawing looks extremely unrealistic. It looks very what is the word? It looks very bland in a way. So if you use your local community pictures, Indian people, Indian props, the sort of trees that are available here, and your renderings can seem even more realistic, right? And they look more accurate to the context. So I think you guys are ready to start working on your drawings. Are there any questions you want to ask regarding your drawings?
So, Kamlesh, sir,
Yeah.
what kind of a drawing should they start with? They have plans, they have sections, they have a concept drawings. So,
Okay.
what
So
would you suggest?
I think for today, because we've looked at this particular section and all, we can work with a plan or section because they will work the same way. So you can take any 2D drawing of your choice from your portfolio and try to render it using these techniques. Use different colors. You can. Okay, I'll show you one more thing, which is the use of patterns. All right. This can come in handy when you are working with plans, especially because you can actually specify a pattern of a grass or tiles or something like that. Um, some of those are ready actually within Photoshop. Let me select a part of the image. Okay, I'm selecting this particular part of the warehouse just to show you how that works. Under fill, you also have this option of patterns, right? There are some set patterns which are there, like you can see a grid pattern which is there, right? So you can actually have it with these things and then later apply another layer of color so that it looks like blue tiles or something like that. You can also create your own pattern. Okay. So the way you can do that, one is actually go on Google and let's say you want a grass pattern, you can Google for seamless grass pattern. Now, seamless basically means when you repeat it multiple times, it will not show कि वो tile हुआ है. It will look like a complete big image itself, right? So if you type seamless, it will gives you that. So once you open that, just gonna make a new file for now. Okay, I have something like this. I'll crop it. Okay, just for the sake, I'll quickly draw a pattern here. I'll make the screen. Okay, and I'll use another brush. Okay, this is a very bad example, but I'm just showing you. So I'll say image, okay, edit, sorry, and define pattern. All right. So this has become a new pattern. So I'll say, let's say grass. So when I go back to this file, this thing is selected still, right? Um, I'll put it in a new layer. I'll call it grass. So if this was a plan, then I could select a portion of my site and I can actually edit and I just defined that pattern. So that pattern has come in this list, right? So I'll say this, okay. So it's filled this space with that pattern. All right. So you can actually make your own patterns and you can, so when you're working with plans or you're working with sections, you have the option of using gradients, you have the option of using flat colors, and you have the option of using patterns. And then you can apply various blending options like drop shadow or stroke and all of that. And you can bring in your own cutouts and then you can use them as props in your sections or in your plans, right? So, yes, anything else? So in terms of drawing, I think you guys would have worked with CAD, and then I think you would now have PDF exports from CAD, right? If you don't, then you can go into CAD and then you can export it in a PDF format. Now that you've seen this demo, you know if you need to make any changes, like for example, if your section lines don't have a box at the bottom and you want to give that ground effect, I had to do it in Photoshop, but you could actually make it in your CAD skill itself right now and then bring it into Photoshop so that it's ready to edit from the beginning.
Kamlesh, one more thing I would suggest you tell them now, because
Yeah,
when they will edit their own drawings, there is a chance it will become very gaudy and
okay,
bright when they start using textures and colors.
right,
So, can
right.
you show how transparency and scaling of textures and colors is done once, so that they can use the texture in the right scale, like the flooring can be large or small, or the colors can be made a little bit transparent so they don't appear very gaudy.
Okay, all right. Um, One thing that I would suggest is that there are a couple of things that you can do. Um, so one is, okay, let me quickly go to transparency and show you that. So within your layers tab, on top you have opacity and fill, right? Now opacity is basically tells you both of these options are roughly the same actually. So it tells you how to. Okay, so since I have made this on top of blue, when I reduce the opacity, it actually shows me the blue in the background, right? But let's say I select that circle which I had drawn, which is at the back, and if I reduce the opacity of that, it will become lighter, right? Because it's blending with the white in the background. So that's one way of working with opacity. Um, to define your patterns, I would suggest that you um, create the pattern itself in the right scale, all right, so that you're able to get this particular. So, um, yeah, so you're able to get this particular scale. The other thing you could do actually is that, which I use, is that I will generally create an entire layer of a pattern. Okay, let me just do that. Select, select. Okay, all right, and I can then individually scale this up and down, right? And then what I will do is I'll create a layer mask for this particular layer. So layer mask is a little complicated. I don't want to get into that right now. What I can quickly show you is that I remove this below my drawing. Okay. Um, all right. So I'm selecting this particular portion. Sorry, in my drawing. Okay, I'll just do a select inverse and I'll delete the, sorry, I'll go to the layer and I'll delete the rest. All right. You can also work with a layer mask on this, but I think I should explain the layer mask in terms of the 3D drawings because we'll be working on that module next. Um, yeah, you can basically create the pattern, resize it according to the way you want, and then just delete the information that you don't want. So that's one thing you can do. You can work with the opacity of this as well. And yeah, one thing that I like to do is you can actually go into Google and you can type color palettes. All right. So a Google search will, let me do that actually right now. You guys can see this as well, right? So when you search for color palettes, it shows you various images of color palettes and color schemes which are there. You can actually pick one that you think is good, right? You can pick a particular scheme that um, you like. Like let's say you take something like this and you like this particular scheme. You can download this image and you can open this in Photoshop on the side And you can use the color picker to basically select parts or colors of this image, and then you can use those colors within your drawing. So if you're not very sure of your color choices or something like that, you can use the help of palettes and then use only those specific, like for example, you might think that you want a pastel sort of a color scheme, so you can use this cloudy color palette and you can use that to render your drawings. Or you want something like the swamp or a darker color scheme, you can use that. So there are a lot of these sort of quick shortcuts and like things that can come in handy, uh, which you can use from Google to streamline your work a bit.
Yeah, I think like Kamlesh has suggested, I would suggest also that you work on one section, since we have seen how, and you have to remember what do you want to present in the section. That is your choice. Like sir had shown the level of privacy or in the section. Uh, in your section, what do you want to show? You could possibly show, if it is a housing ka section, then what is public, private, and very semi-private zone, or what do you want to represent, that you have to decide and then represent. Okay.
I think this
You
is
can
something that I think we always discuss in architecture school, is that the pen and paper is your best friend. Matlab, I know I'm showing this all of this like techniques to render on Photoshop, but always do your section with hand first so that you understand what you want to show, and then use Photoshop to basically give you a very crisp and professional looking sort of edit of that. But unless you do a little sketch of your section first and then figure out what information you want to show on it, in Photoshop you'll be confused. You won't know what colors to start with. You won't know what information you want to show in the section. Like all of these tools that I showed you to use in your drawings only work if you are clear about what you want to show in your drawings. So I hope, since you guys have been working on the studio for a bit and you have been working on your drawings, you I think made sketches first, you would know exactly what you want to say, so that it becomes easier. We can discuss your drawings one on one as well while you're working on it, and if you have any doubts, we can figure out how you can represent it better. I think one thing I didn't show you, which I think you all just should by default know, is that please save your files. You don't want Photoshop to hang and then all of your work to go away. It's a very heavy system. All right. So when you save a file, save it as a PSD, which is a Photoshop file, PSD. Right? Do I need to show that, or you guys know how to save a file? I'm going to show it anyway. File. I hope you can see this file. Save as. Okay, it's giving me the name which it has taken from the PDF which I had imported. I'll save it in the same folder. And this is the format that you want, the Photoshop format, which is the PSD. You don't want to save it as a JPEG or PNG, otherwise all the information will be lost. Pick PSD and save it. Okay, right, and it's saving your file. City a bit, right, and I'll be able to see the image through it. And of course, this is still obstructing the image. So to make it seem like this particular highlighted element is within the picture, what we would need to do is actually bring up certain cutouts from the image itself on top. All right, so I'm just going to turn this layer off for a bit. And actually, this woman is wearing a burqa, so she can be very easily selected with the wand tool. Right, I'll just zoom in so that I can. Uh, so you have a selection. When you want to deselect something from the image, from the selection, when you press down the Alt, you see that next to the selection there is a minus sign which comes. So since this person's trousers have also been selected, I'm just gonna deselect that particular portion. And I also want her feet to be selected. So I'll press Shift, the plus sign appears, And now this person is completely selected. I'll Control C, Control V, so that she has been pasted. Now she's still behind our particular first layer, the layer that we created, the highlight that we created. All we have to do is just move her on top, right? You can do similar things with the other elements, like for example, these bikes. Or you could even, what you could just basically do is that remove the part of the select or the path that we made and directly delete it from the layer that we made. I don't like to do that. I would rather make a cutout of the bike and place it on top again, because then you can do things like add shadows and things like that to make it seem like the road is actually highlighted and it's a three-dimensional element or object. So you can do that with the person behind as well. You can do that with other props which might be appearing. I chose this image because it's very simple. There's only one person, and the effect can be achieved much easily. But you can do that with your own site photographs, which might be more complicated, which might be more detailed. You can highlight particular activities which are happening. I'm just going to do one thing right now, since I've already made a cutout of this woman. To give it a certain effect that that she's there in the image and not just a cutout which is standing out, I'm going to add a shadow. But since this is 3D, I can't do a drop shadow, right? Because if I do a drop shadow, what happens is that it will be applied flat onto this canvas. I'll just do it to show you what it looks like. This is the angle which specifies where the shadow should be cast. Is the spread so that you can see it. Okay. So as you can see, the shadow is there, but it looks very flat because this is obviously a two-dimensional shadow which is being cast. So we don't quite want something like that, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this layer. I can maybe name it shadow. Always a good idea to name your layer so that when you work with really large projects, it becomes easy to identify your layers. And there's a duplicated element which is now present. So I'm going to now transform this into a shadow. So what I will do is that I will give it an overlay. I can choose a darker color. I can, and then I can change the opacity of this particular layer so that it's see-through, right? So that when I align it with the object, it looks like an actual shadow. And what I will basically do is I just pressed Control T, which is the shortcut for transform. You could also go into edit and do the same, right? So I'm just going to transform this quickly this manner. Okay. Place it behind this. I just have to actually move it below the actual layer so that it goes behind. I can use other transformation as well. I can give it a perspective so that it shrinks on one side, so that it looks like there's an you get a perspective effect. I can Control T again. I can reduce the size of this. I can keep changing the opacity till it looks like it belongs here. I can transform skew. I can basically skew it around so that it looks like the direction is different. And when I'm done with this, I will basically use the filter, and I will blur it a little. So lens blur, so that the edges are not so sharp. I can increase the radius of the blur. It's taking a while. I think it's because this image is large. So it's taking a bit more time. Please feel free to interrupt and ask me if there is any doubt or questions. I'll just let this finish. All right, so you get this sort of blurred effect. You can do this with the other objects in the frame as well. Sometimes when the image is really large and there are multiple such small objects, what I sometimes do is I will just add a layer. All right, I will take a brush. I will reduce the hardness. All right, I'll reduce the opacity. Let's increase the size of this. Turn the shadow off. And what I will do is I will just sorry. I will basically just paint the shadow. When I don't want too much detail, you can actually do something like this. I've created it on a separate layer so that later if I want to delete it, edit it, I can just use an eraser and get rid of the shadow. When you want, of course, a certain amount of specificity for a particular object, you can use this cutout. With people, you can basically just use a brush and then quickly draw a shadow. But with more complicated objects, you want the shadow to be cast exactly as the object is, so that it looks more realistic. Within this image, only I can make various such layers. I could highlight this particular wall, which is running along. I'll make another layer. Give it maybe another color. Again, reduce the opacity. Just putting this in the same layer, but ideally you should make another layer for this. And then, yeah, I can later when I'm annotating it, I can talk about basically how this particular wall is of some significance, or what does it mean, or what does it signify. So you can basically select many such elements and then highlight them in your site drawings. I could also make the rest of it adjustments, saturation. I can just remove the color information, basically get rid of the color, and only highlight certain parts of the image so that they stand out, right? So when all of this is, the rest of it is black and white, you can much more easily understand the pathway, the building profile, and things like that. So that's something you guys can achieve. Okay, I'm just going to. Are there any questions so far? You guys understood all of this, right? Okay. So I'm just going to delete all of this.
Students, when sir is showing you something now, try to think of places where you can apply it. or ideas which you can show using these techniques. So if you think always application based, you will remember it better.
Yes, and in fact, I think just like yesterday, just because I showed a pathway example, I hope the students don't all start showing pathways unless it is actually important in their case. Think of other things that you can highlight, other information, maybe activities, maybe people, maybe certain monuments that you want to highlight with relation to your site, with relation to your design. So please be very specific when you are going to use this. And yeah, so I'm just going to go back again to the original image, and I'm going to show you another tool that comes in handy, which I did speak about yesterday, which is the clone stamp. All right. I will just open up the okay. Now, clone stamp, which is this particular tool, which is below your brush tool, um, is a tool which helps you replicate a part of the image within the same image or within another image. Now, what that means is that I'm just going to create a new layer here. All right, is that if I want to repeat uh, a part of the image anywhere else, I can take the information directly from an image. Now, let's say I wanted to replicate this particular person. All right, what I can do is that I've already made another layer. All right, but to select the original image, I'm going to select my background layer, and I'm going to press down on my Alt key. Okay, you can see how the cursor has changed when I press down on the Alt key because it's asking me where the information needs to come from, and I'll just say give it a starting point, maybe which is this. Okay, and I release it, and now the cursor has changed to basically that particular part of the image, right? So I'll go back to the new layer, all right, and when I start clicking and holding and drawing with it, what happens is that it replicates the image within this particular space, right? And I can move it around, I can resize it. Of course, for it to fit, you'll have to figure out how to layer it, how to overlap it with other things. But this comes in very handy when you want to actually replicate textures. So maybe there is a certain thing which you want to remove. Like, for example, let me just take this particular wall as an example. I just select the clone stamp again. Um, the stamp is still taking the information which I had previously defined. I'm going
Okay, we'll wait for him to rejoin. I'll give him a call. Meanwhile, I would like you to go back to the graphics. I think Amit, I don't remember his name, from New York, who gave the workshop. Yes. Now, if you remember those images, you can understand how the basic must be constructed in a 3D software, and all those colors being added to convert it into a diagram to show one particular thing. Maybe connectivity between places or walking spaces or uh, courtyard to building relationships or background to the building relationship was shown using Photoshop as a medium. So it's important to remember what you've seen before and actually understand how or imagine how it must be created in Photoshop. Yeah, that is quite important. Okay, he's back. Kamlesh is back. You are on mute.
sorry. So can you tell me where I got dropped out so I can continue from there?
So we saw the second burqa-clad woman, It was
Right.
just, I think, 30 seconds.
Okay. All right. All right. I'll just undo this particular part. So, yes. So, what I was talking about is that it comes in very handy, especially when you want to replicate certain textures within the same image or fix very small issues which are there. So, just for example, I'm going to use it within this wall here. It's still taking the information from. Oh, sorry. Did it not? Okay. Let me just. Let me know when it starts showing on your screens. Can you guys see the screen yet?
Yeah, we can see it now.
All right. So as I was saying, it can help you kind of fix things within the same image or replicate textures. Right now, the cursor is still taking the information that I had previously defined. Um, so I'm using the clone stamp again. I'll press down Alt one more time, and I will choose this particular part of the image so that it's defined. Now, wherever I choose, that particular texture can start replicating, right? I can do this as many times as required to get that effect. I can, this is a very hard brush. If I reduce the hardness, I can get a much smoother effect actually. And you can fix small issues which might be there. You can replicate textures. Maybe you want to increase some green foliage which is there, so you can actually choose a part of the image where it exists and then replicate it. Where you get the same light quality, you get the same quality in the image. I can also do that. I just opened this up to kind of show you that it's also possible in a different image which might be open separately. So you can open up a texture file or a image in another tab, and then you can actually start using the clone tool from there. Now next, I'm just going to open up a Google map. So that let me make a new. I just realized I actually never taught you guys how to make a new file. So I'll just quickly do that as well. So when you select file and new, it gives you this dialog box. You can specify the name of the file here. You can also do it when you're saving it later. And it gives you these presets for the size, right? So according to like A1, A0, A1, A0, I think is there because I specified it. Generally, you have sizes up to I think A3. Yeah. So just for now, I'm going to just take a A4 size. Resolution is something that you need to be kind of aware about. 300 is a very good resolution for print. However, it makes the file very heavy. I would choose 150. And if you are going to just use the image to be shown on a screen, you can just choose 75 or 90 pixels per inch because your screen monitor doesn't have any more pixels than that in an inch area. So even if you say 150, it's not going to show 150 quality. So that's something that you can save up on file size. All right. So I'm just going to drag in Google image into this. Now this is a Google image, but it could also be a plan that you have made that you want to kind of do this with. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to create a sort of isometric sort of a view with this. I think some of you might already understand how to achieve that because we have spoken about the tool previously, which is the perspective tools. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to let me just rasterize this. So I'm going to use the perspective tool, and I'm going to take this inwards so that it looks like it is in perspective. It still looks very inaccurate because obviously, as you all know, that when you view things in perspective, they also shorten, which it hasn't yet. So I will use Control T, and I will just simply shorten it so that it looks like uh, it is an object which has been placed in a three-dimensional plane, or I can see it in an isometric. I could also have twisted it and then done the same so that you get similar effect. I can also skew it to get a different sort of effect. I think you can see what sort of perspective it is creating. You can use this to also use your or create perspective for objects that you insert within your drawings, which could be a ground line, or it could be a pathway or things like that. I will just duplicate this. Just deleting a part of this, which is the ocean or the sea. Now I can actually make multiple copies of this, or you can use different images. Generally, one uses different images. So let's say that I have actually created um, uh, multiple layers on a Google image. So I will take this image and use it as a background or as a base layer. Then I will work on this image and create, let's say, just the road network. Then I will work on this image and create, let's say, just the important buildings. And then I will export them as PNGs. So when you bring them here, just try to remember when you are doing the transformations, there are certain parameters which come up on top. So it tells you how much you have used the perspective, like what is the degree that you have used the perspective for, how much is the degree of skew that you have used, so that when you are using multiple such layers, you keep these parameters same. Otherwise, they look like they're not matching with each other. Right now, I've just duplicated the same layer. That's why it does, of course, look the same. But when you bring in different layers with different information, you want to make sure that each of it is transformed to the same extent. All right. So then, if there is different information, all of this, it looks like it has been stacked on top of each other like an exploded axonometric, and then you can basically explain certain things. Of course, later when I will put annotations when I take this image to InDesign, and I can actually point out things. I can take out leaders and say what it is. I can write information on it. So that's something that one can use. Is there any doubt with this? Otherwise, I will then open up um, another file and show you how to basically how I have created the 3Ds. Are there any doubts so far? All right, I'm okay. No doubts. All right, I'm just going to close this, and I will open up. So I think some of the work that Pulkit sir has shown you, I will open up those files itself so that you kind of understand how I have created it. Open up this first. So one thing I'm assuming that everyone knows is that when you guys create a model or something like that within SketchUp, how you can export that as a simple line drawing. Is everyone aware of that? Otherwise, I can later open up a SketchUp file and show you that as well.
We will have to show that.
All right. Okay. Okay. So for now, what I will do is I will just show you what kind of output you get. So this is the base file that I used, which I got from SketchUp, which is a PDF file. So I created the entire model in SketchUp, and then I changed the style to a hidden line style, which is basically just black and white lines. And then I exported it to PDF. So you can see that it's just a base image which has the lines. This is supposed to be a mangrove park at the edge of Minky River. So this is the river which is at the bottom. These are boardwalks that have been created, and then there are steps leading up to the water edge, and then there are buildings behind. So this is very simple output that I took from SketchUp. I'll show you how I did that as well. But I will first now open this, and I'll show you what are the components of this particular image. I think just by looking at it, you can see the very obvious ones, which is basically these elements or people which are there. I actually, as a joke, what I like to do is I insert a cutout of myself within the image. So what you see here is me sitting. Um, I mean, so all of these trees, which are cutouts that I have created, which have been inserted. I'll just turn those off so that you can see what those are. And all of the coloring that you see has been basically done by the wand tool, which is that I go into the, let me try to find, yeah, so like I said, please name your layers, otherwise you will be struggling like me, because this is a very large image and it has a lot of information. So all of this was basically created using the wand tool. I went to my drawing layer and I pressed down shift and I selected all of the things which are supposed to be the pavement. And once they were selected, I created a new layer and I filled it in with color. I did the same with the water which is behind. The boardwalk. Okay. Now, I think a very important part of this image is the mangroves. All right. And what I basically did to achieve that is I used the clone tool. So I opened up multiple images of mangroves, which I found from the internet in new tabs. I tried to find images which looked like somewhat like what kind of perspective that I was looking at in this particular image. And then what I did is that I used the clone tool to basically draw in um, these mangroves, right? So if I turn it off, you understand what parts of it is what. There are multiple types of mangrove files that I used just to sort of get a overlapping sense of the different effects that you can get. Is everything so far okay with this image? Are there any questions about this image, or I will open up another file?
See, I think this image will be actually, to understand this images will be very helpful for you when you make your 3D and present the design. This is exactly what I was talking about to see how it can be applied in your three-dimensional drawings. So you can export, instead of having renders in V-Ray or Lightworks or something like that, which become too realistic. Sometimes you don't want that. So this is a very graphical way to show design and to show layers. Maybe it would be sensible to turn everything else off and just show the pathway with the 2D drawing at the back, or only show the street network that is there, or only show where the mangroves will be there as a diagram. So you can have multiple diagrams showing each layer separately, and very quickly you are able to generate those layers in Photoshop or these diagrams. Just turn off a few layers and you have the next image ready. So
In fact, I think if anyone of you has actually used V-Ray or try to render with that, you understand how much time it takes to actually render a good size image uh, with all of these realistic props. Now, this particular SketchUp file that I used for this was, since it was my thesis, it was the entire Mahi area which I had created on SketchUp. Now, if I were to insert all of these elements like trees, street lights, and all of that within SketchUp, I don't think I would ever be able to do any work with it because the file would become so heavy. So I was able to basically create very simple blocks, just the basic road networks, just the basic building blocks, and then I was able to add information on Photoshop when I'm doing the views. Also, a problem with all of these V-Ray renders and all of that is that the kind of props that you will get generally in terms of people, either if they're very realistic, it will be too heavy, or they will not be very realistic, or the problem will be that they look like they are not in India. Like, I don't think you can find a sari-clad woman on SketchUp which looks realistic for you to render with. So this is a sort of alternative which is very quick, very light, comparatively light, I would say, so that you can create very complex SketchUp models, bring them into Photoshop, and very contextualize them to such an extent that you can actually add props which are very local. You can add people which are very local. This actually still doesn't have a lot of elements that one could have had because I wasn't focusing too much on that. But you can actually achieve a great deal of detail when it comes to rendering with Photoshop such 3Ds. Are there any questions about this? Otherwise, I will open up another file.
I think most of the questions would come up when they try to
Start
think where they can do something like this. So I think you'll have, even if you have a block 3D of your design ready, you can actually do this because as a learning experience. So when you finish your three-dimensional drawing, you can make the final one, which will go into your portfolio. Or those block 3Ds can become diagrams to explain your concepts and or the various layers that are there in the design, and later on you show the final design.
All right, so this is another part of the same SketchUp model that I had made. So as you can see, like, it's a very huge SketchUp model. It was more, I think, a couple of square kilometers that I had covered when I was making it. This is the fort that you see on the left. This is, of course, the design intervention. It's not particularly what is existing on site right now, although the fort exists and the Mahi Mosque exists. So again, the base file that I used was this, which is now disappearing. I'll just turn off everything else so that you understand how I started. So this was the base output that I got from SketchUp, which is just the lines which are there in the model. And just like earlier, I chose the wand tool, and then I went to my drawing layer, which is layer 1 here, and then I selected the parts that I wanted to highlight. Right. So these were the pavement areas that I selected. Sometimes you will need to zoom in to actually be able to select it. It's a very small area. Sometimes you can just draw it with a brush if it can't be selected because it's too small. Right. So I'll select this. So then I added the pavement. I added the green areas. I added water and the beach. All of these are in separate layers so that I can edit them separately. The cycle track. This is the. It shouldn't be on one layer, but I just put it on one layer. You can see that there's a variation in the colors which are on top of the building and which are on the sides of the building, so that quickly you kind of get a sense of 3D or 3 dimension within this image.
Actually, if when you are showing this, now there's an idea that came to my mind. Some student can just show this on one layer, show the walkway, yes, and then on another layer show the green, and actually make it like a film, a movie, and explain
Right.
it. So you have 10 seconds to talk about the pathways. Then you switch off the pathways, all the pink parts come on, and you have 10 seconds to explain about that. And then that goes away, or just the pink and the green comes on, and you show the interrelation between the two. So this is just a technique. The application you will have to keep thinking of like this. In your design, what can you do? In my design, what can I do? Be
In fact,
aware of it.
as Sir is saying, there is actually an option to create an animation in Photoshop. A lot of people don't know that Photoshop can actually make animations. It's a little complicated process that if we have time, I can explain later. Is that what Sir said of each element coming in one by one, you can actually do that animation within Photoshop with this animation pane. All you have to do is basically create various layer states, which means one layer state will be where everything is off, another layer state will be where just the payment comes in, another layer state might be just the road come in, and all of that, and you keep creating these layer states animation uh, and give the keyframe rate and all of that. And what happens is that it will create a video or a GIF or an animation of how this progression keeps happening. So that's actually also possible in Photoshop. A lot of people don't know that. I'm just going to turn this off. Yes. Um, and I was creating the boardwalk. I made the mistake of making a very detailed boardwalk, which had individual buttons and all of that visible. Of course, when you zoom out, it all becomes black, and that is what happened with this particular boardwalk. So I had to color over it. So I actually just made the boardwalk again by selecting it and painting it with a color, and then I just gave it a stroke. So the black outline you see is basically the stroke, which I can remove, and that's the color overlay. And this is the final image that I. So this is again from the same model. I place a camera somewhere here, took a view looking at the fort and looking at this cycle track, looking at these floodable park systems, and I'm in the background. as you can see that in the model itself, there are no trees, there is no information like that, because otherwise it becomes very difficult to understand exactly what is happening in the 3D. But I was able to get this output. Let me again just, oh wow, okay. Too many layers. Um, yeah, so I was able to insert the trees, I was able to insert the people. Um, this particular graphic of a cycle is also a 2D image that I brought in like that. When you, like I said earlier, when you click something, it tells you how many layers are in that place, right? So this is the layer that has the cycle track. This is the layer which has the. So I used, it's a flat image. I used the perspective tool to basically make it seem like it's flat against the cycle. It looks like it's been imprinted on the pavement. I haven't done this, but I can just do it now and show you. There is this other option of inner shadow. What that actually does is it makes it look like it's been engraved into the pavement. So you can see that I just, when I turn it on and off, if I add the inner shadow, it looks like it's been carved into the pavement itself. The more you kind of play around with Photoshop and see what all of these options do, you will get a better idea of how you can use them. You will get more familiar with these options. Visual. I can. Oh yeah. So, like for example, in this image, it would have been extremely tedious to create the shadows by duplicating every prop and then transforming it, applying a blur and all of that. So what I did is I just created a layer above the pigment layer, which is this layer, layer 6, and I just took a brush and I painted in the shadows, right? And you can see the kind of difference that that shadow basically makes. You can define the level of detail that you want. You can zoom in really close, and when you're painting it in, you can actually try to recreate the profile of the actual prop. All of that is possible. I actually don't have a background in this. I have turned off the background, and you can see there is this checkerboard pattern, so that when I exported this in a PNG format, could actually put a graphic element in InDesign itself. So I was able to do that. I think that is the image that you guys saw earlier, where there was a large graphic element, circular graphic element behind the port. So again, all of these things are in separate layers, and they have been filled in basically. The only thing which exists out of the props is basically this light pole, which is there. Now, okay, so obviously this light pole is on the SketchUp image, which means that it's just a line. And I wanted to insert the trees, right? So what I actually had to do was that I had to copy and paste it on top, so that when I insert the trees, uh, they seem like they are behind the pole. So you will have to do such small adjustments. You might have to take some part of the drawing, bring it out, replicate it, duplicate it, so that when you layer it, it looks realistic, right? So as you can see, there are a lot of layers in this. It's very easy to work when I actually sat down and made it. But if I have to now edit it and turn things off and all, it will be a very tedious process. So yeah, make your layers. Cannot stress this enough. Please make your layers. All right. So I think that's about it for the demo. Do you guys have any questions before I stop presenting? If you want to ask something, that I can quickly show it on Photoshop itself right now. All right. So I will just stop presenting.
Okay, I just want to ask, uh, not the students, like, are you able to figure out how you will be able to use this in your portfolio? You could have some doubts about that, uh, or this technique of having layers and this technique of showing diagrams uh, very nicely. Are you able to figure out ideas where you can use this technique to show those ideas? Can you type out some of the ideas that you are thinking of where you can, and idea and the kind of drawing you will use? Maybe a 3D, maybe a 2D. uh, like actually you could put up a section and show the street in perspective from a photograph that you already have. uh, like someone had put that lamp post in perspective view. So instead, you can actually put the photograph of the 3D only of the street, not the building, uh, of the public spaces, or spaces which are outside your building, just to show how the building will be actually when it is, built inside. So this can be one way. Anything else that you realize you can, uh, what kind of drawings you can create using these techniques? I think it's more important you figure that out, like we talked yesterday, what to do with this technique. Can you type out some ideas that come to your mind, or you can say them out loud also?
I guess that if you guys don't have doubts, there are only two possibilities. One is that you have understood it really well, or you have not understood it at all, and you are really confused to even ask a doubt. I hope it is the former and not the latter. Uh, I guess I will only understand once you guys start working and show us what results you can do. I am just trying to open up the SketchUp file in the background. Once it is open, I will quickly show you how to export from SketchUp into the format. All right. Okay, so it's open. I'll just start presenting again. I just remembered that.
Yeah, so Jay has typed out that it would be helpful in delayering the design explanation. Yeah, that is correct. So what kind of a drawing would we use to, uh, will you use a plan, will you use a section, will you use a 3D with a sky view or a human eye view? What would you use? Would you use an elevation?
So I have not thought what I would use, but the technique would be really helpful in the
Yes,
color.
now, so can you start thinking about it? Because say if you have an elevation and you want to show how the windows are arranged, yes, so you could possibly have just a window, shown in the elevation as rendered as important element, and that is why the rest of the elevation is completely blank, because windows and jalis in Rajasthan are extremely decorative. So that could be one idea. So you can apply this technique to elevation also, or maybe 3D like sir just showed and is showing also now.
All right. So I hope everyone is able to see my screen. So this is a SketchUp file. I deleted all the extra information that was not required. I just kept it for this. So this would probably be generally the kind of view you would see in a SketchUp file, right? This is the kind of shading that you would see, or something like this maybe. So when you want to put it in a format where it's just lines, what you want to do is basically under the window, um, you have this option under default tree which is called styles, which is already selected because it's open here. If it's not open, you can go into window and select styles. It will give you these styles. Um, within this, there are multiple sort of styles that are available that you can use in SketchUp to get certain effects and all of that. But for the sake of what we want to do in Photoshop, I'm going to choose the hidden line style, which is here, right, which is on top, and then I try to find out what is the angle that I want my view to be. Uh, I can place a camera as well. If I want a human perspective, I can place a camera, and then I get it at the eye level that I want, and maybe I want to look up at the buildings, I want to see the street or something like that, or just use an isometric sort of a view. Oh, that. All right. Okay. Ash. Try opening it again. So, what you need to basically do is that when you open up that model and you use the hidden line style, you can go to File, Export, and then choose PDF. Okay, and it will basically export the same view which is open on your screen at that moment as a PDF file with just those lines. Okay, I would have probably not exported anyway because it takes a while for it to export in a good enough quality. But if it opens up, I'll just quickly show that. And then you get the output that I used as the base layer, and it has just the line. It doesn't even have the information of white in it. So when you drag it into Photoshop, it appears the same way as you would export a file from, let's say, AutoCAD, with just the lines and none of the background information. All right. I'll just quickly show that remaining portion. Under File, Export 2D Graphic. I can specify where I want to save it. And just open up Options because it will tell you exactly what size you want to export it on. So 11 inches is, I think, something like an A4 size, uh, which is also quite heavy uh, because it will export to PDF. At least my files tend to get very heavy. So you can specify what is the size of image that you want. Right now, I don't think you need to mess with the other options so much. And yeah, and when you say export, it will export it to that PDF format. I'm not going to do that, but that is the basic process. Anything else that you guys, now that I'm presenting my screen again, anything else that you guys want me to quickly explain, or we will do a Q&A quickly and then we'll get you guys working on your own designs.
So is it possible to export the shadows in a PDF?
Yes, actually. So if you choose any of these other styles which have shadows,
Because I tried it yesterday, but the shadows were visible in the SketchUp model, but not in the PDF.
okay, okay. That should generally not be the case because when you export it as a 2D graphic, it exports basically whatever is on your screen. So maybe the style was not correct. In fact, I also can't seem to find a style which has a shadow.
If in case such a thing happens, what you could optionally do is export as a JPEG. Then what happens, the shadow remains in the image also. Then you can crop the shadow as a boundary and then put it on top of the PDF that
Yes.
you already have.
So it will be in the View tab. View shadows.
This should ideally Maybe you guys can try it one more time now. So just try this hidden line option, and then try the export option. See if it works. If it doesn't, then what Sir suggested could be done. Another thing you could do is that you could just in this view do a print screen so that you get this particular view, and then use that as a background layer on Photoshop, so that it's easy to just quickly select. So in Photoshop, what I can do is I can use the selection tool and just tuck, tuck, I can select this particular shadow, and again quickly create another shadow, because it's a polygon shape, right? It's just points, points, points. And I can quickly create another layer and add a color, change the opacity, and your shadow is ready. So that's one option that you can actually apply. So if these guys have site photographs, and if they have a SketchUp model in place roughly of their design, what they can do is they can try both of these things out today. So they can export a basic view from the SketchUp model, and again the cutouts are ready, or you can create your own cutouts and try to render the colors on their views and insert these props. And maybe a couple of side photographs you can edit so that you can show some information, not just a pathway, but maybe some information about light, some information about activities which might be happening, some information about features, maybe certain architectural features which you can highlight. So you guys can edit your own photographs and have those ready. So one thing that would happen on the last day, which is tomorrow, is that you will have your plans and sections which you made yesterday. You will have these photographs which you will edit today. You will have these views that you will edit today. And tomorrow, what we can do is we can try to compose a sheet on InDesign with all of this information, write some information, write some text onto it, so that you get a portfolio ready sheet. In sheets, and you don't need to basically see what is facing each other. So I can uncheck this. So it will only show me individual pages one after the other. I will say create document. Yeah. So if you guys can see, basically it has created these three columns for me to align my layout to. I think it's too wide. So what I'll do is I'll edit this. So you can also, like I said, you could do it later. So under layout, margins and column, I'll just increase the number of columns here, right? So you can see it's already made the columns for me. This is a typical A3 size. The ruler shows you the size of the document. All right. Okay. Most of the tools are very standard, very similar. So like, for example, selection and moving happens with these two. You have a text box or a type tool. You have line, anchor, pen tool. You can create curved lines with, and you have your basic shapes. All right. There are gradients and things like that. There's a color picker as well. And then again, very similarly, it gives you a color dialog box in the back. But of course, since this is not Photoshop, there is no foreground, background color and things like that. It tells you what is the fill, and it tells you what is the outline. So you can see that right now there is actually no object selected. So there is no fill, and by default the outline is set to a black. So if I were to create any object right now, like a rectangle or a text box or anything, it will basically take up these options. All right. So some of the features that InDesign has, which are very different than Photoshop, which come in very handy when we are basically working with the idea of publishing or texts and things like that, is that within InDesign, text is a continuous thing. Like in Photoshop, if you have to add text, let's say you write a paragraph and then you make a text box, it will, and let's say the space is not enough, you will actually have to cut out that text, create another text box, put that text in the other place and things like that. With InDesign, it recognizes that these text is one continuous thing, and you can let me show you actually. I think it'll be easier to understand. So I selected my text tool. All right, I'm going to create a text box. I have an option actually to fill it with placeholder text, which is just basically random text. Okay, so you see that it has basically just filled up some text there. And the good thing or the interesting thing about InDesign is, okay, let's say in my layout, a picture is going to come below this text, and this thing is too long right now. This particular column of text is too long. So I'll reduce it. And of course, the text is gone. But if you see this red plus sign next to the box, it means that there is more text which is not being shown. So if I click on it, it tells me where to take that extra text. I could, let's say I'll place it somewhere here. And now the remaining text has come here. Now, if while working in the layout, I feel like, okay, I need more space here, I can just reduce it here, and the text just keeps going to the next box automatically, right? So it's very easy in terms of working with text and other publishing elements, because you don't have to keep modifying your text constantly, right? Okay.
Can we combine the two boxes also?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I can just increase this, the text will just come back, and I'll delete this extra box. Because it is already combined. It is one. It is supposed to be one continuous text. So it is already in a combined state. And if I, again, like I said, move it around, it automatically adjusts itself. All right. Create a shape. All right. Like I'll just, for example, I'll create a rectangle. So as you can, like I had said earlier, this was the setting of the color of any object which is there. So the fill is blank, which means there is no fill. It's not a white fill. There is a red cross, which means there is no fill, and the outline is black. So if I deselect, you will be able to see that it has created a black rectangle. And the options of this you can see up here. So again, it's a blank or rather a no fill rectangle, and this is the outline width, which is 1 point, right? So it works on a system of points. So I can just keep increasing the point, decreasing the point to get the thickness that I want of this box. Now these boxes are basically elements which can take other data, which means like it can take up a picture, it can take all of that. And for that, it's actually a very simple drag and drop process that I can just bring this in and I can drop it here. And it has, okay, so the previous time it worked. All right. So it has inserted the picture into the box. It's of course not resized correctly, but I can do that while I'm working on this. So one very important thing to know, I'll just delete this and I'll bring in another picture and I'll. So when I drag and drop a picture or a picture file into InDesign, it shows me where I want to insert it. So let me insert it here. And it has brought in the picture. All right. So the thing thing with resizing in InDesign is that it actually does not resize the image itself. It resizes the box that holds the image. Okay. Now I'll explain what that means. So I'll just align this to this side. Okay. Now let's say this picture is going extra outwards. It's going into my fourth margin. I don't want that. I want it to be included only within the central two columns. So let's say I use this particular anchor point to bring it in. Now, instead of resizing the image, it just resizes the box. So you can see that it actually starts cropping the image according to the box that is there. So when you want to actually resize the image itself, there are multiple options that you can use. One is to actually specify in terms of percentage or width, which is on top. So you can see it gives you these options. One is the placement of it. So on X and Y coordinates where this picture is. The other is it tells you the width and height of this picture. So I can reduce that as well. Or I can define it in percentage. So I can actually take it down to 90%. So it has done that. The other thing I could do is I can click this, and then it shows me a orange outline of this image. So the orange outline is the image itself. So I can reduce that. So I actually don't need to press down the shift key. It maintains the aspect ratio. If I press down the shift key, it will release the aspect. Okay. So I don't want that. And now the inside image has been resized. I'll click outside, and then I can again change the box itself. And let me undo this. So I generally like to work with the percentage itself. You can type in the percentage, or there are some standard sizes which are there, which I can use. Now, this particular image is a JPEG, which means that this white information is actually there in the image. So okay, I'm just going to change the filling of this. Let's say I'll take it into a black. So you kind of see that the fill is right now outside where the image is. So what it basically means is that there is also a fill color there, and there is also a fill image which is there in the same box. And you can change that. So if this JPEG was not a one like an opaque image, if it was a transparent image, which means like a PNG, this background information would not be there, and then you would actually be able to see things which are behind overlapped. So let me do one thing. I'll bring in one of the cutouts which is there so that you understand that as well. So the cutouts are of course the PNG images. So when I bring something like that in, it still shows me the rectangle. Wait, I don't think this is a PNG. I need to delete that. Yeah. Resize this. Now, if I bring it above this image, you can see that you can actually see through it and you can see the image behind. Right now, because this rectangle, if you see above, it doesn't have an outline and it doesn't have a fill. If I had added a fill to it, it would give it that background behind it. I can also add outlines to it. The outline color, let's say I'll make it black. So you can work with transparent images. So if you guys have actually created PNGs of your plans and of those graphics that you were working with, you could actually bring them directly in. If you keep the fill as none, and if you don't have an outline, you can actually place it so that you can have other elements behind it. You can have text running behind it. There are multiple options which are available, which is why I told you that when you are working with your graphics, try to create them as transparent images because they allow for much better versatility. The text box itself, again, if I select the text, it gives me the options, which is what is the font. You can choose from a drop-down list of fonts if you want to change the font. It tells you the size of the font. Um, 12 generally is something that is a visible font for print size. Do not keep anything which is too small so that when it's printed, it is legible. These are the other options like bold and italic. What is the thickness of the font rather? And then under paragraph, it gives you options of what sort of a justification you want. So this is a um, left aligned justified text, and you could center align it. These are the sort of options that you get. One thing that I always do as a principle is that always keep the hyphenation off. Okay. If you know what it did, if you can notice in the second paragraph, there is a word. Okay, this is all anyway gibberish, but there's a word which is CUMQUID, which is getting cut and it's getting hyphenated. Now that is something you don't want hyphenated text or words in your layouts because they look very unprofessional. You don't want words to get cut, so you just remove the hyphenation. So it will automatically adjust, and you can keep it aligned so that your text looks neat. All right. Now, while creating layouts, you want to highlight something. So one of the easier ways to do it is that one could, create a box around it and things like that. Right now, again, there is no fill to this. I'll remove the outline and I'll give it like a red fill, let's say. Okay, the text is gone because obviously the text is behind. I'll send it. I think these options you might remember from other editing softwares like the arrangement, send to back, all of these things are there even in CAD. And then you can change the color of the text. I'll choose a paper. Paper basically means there is no color there because we will generally print on white paper. So it says paper. I'll just zoom out. So while you're working with InDesign, it keeps showing you these guides and it keeps showing you these margins and all of that. So one shortcut that you will keep using is the W shortcut. All right, do not confuse it with the W in Photoshop, which activates the magic wand. So what it does is that it gets rid of all of these things so that you can see how your sheet will look actually when it's printed without all of these guides and like markers. So I keep toggling between the two so that while I'm working and I don't want any distractions and I want to see what the final product will look like, I'll keep toggling between the two views. All right.
Kamlesh,
Yeah.
can you show them how additional guidelines can be put?
Okay. So so this is also a technique or rather a tool that comes in even in Photoshop is that when you are adding guides, you can simply click and drag from the ruler. Okay, so if you do this, it will bring in a horizontal guide. There is right now no ruler. I don't know if there is a ruler on the left hand side, but I can actually
It might
add.
be there. You will have to move the toolbox.
Oh yeah, I think it is there. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I just dragged the toolbox. It was floating. I just attached it to the window. So now, and I can add vertical guides as well. So it'll give you these blue lines which are there, and you can add as many as you want. One very sort of common sense wala tip is that try to keep your elements within a certain grid. So when you basically have these columns ready, you can basically use those to create your layouts. They look neater. Try to keep pictures within standard grids. So like one column pictures, two column pictures, things like that. It's a simple sort of hack that you can use so that your layouts look neat. And when you're done with these guides, you can just take them back and they'll just disappear. Uh, you can also add elements like lines. So that is the line tool. When you press down the shift key, it makes the line straight, right? So it will take them into certain set directions. So it will be like a vertical, diagonal, or horizontal line. And when you create the line, again, since the line is a linear element, it has no fill. It only has an outline. You can specify the thickness of the line. You can specify the type of the line. So you can have dotted line, you can have dashed line, things of that. Yeah, things like that. And I'll just take this back to a solid line so that you can also see. So, and then you get these other options for that line on the side in your Windows panel. So you can specify also what is the sort of end to the line that you require. So if you're creating leaders, you're creating pointers which are coming from various elements in your layout, you can specify how the start of it is and how the end of it is, and you can specify the scale of that. So if I make it 200%, it gives me a larger circle at the end. I can change the type of arrow. So generally, I like to do all my annotations here because these are vector um elements, which means that they will not lose quality when you are printing them. They do not get pixelated. You can very easily move them around. You can change them. Your text can be edited very easily, which is why I asked you to hold out on creating layouts on Photoshop, because it also becomes very heavy. That is the other thing. So if you add these arrows and everything in Photoshop, it becomes very heavy as well. Um, so it's a way of kind of streamlining the process of creating your designs and sheets. If let's say you have created a layout and then later you realize that, oh, my drawing has a mistake, and then you go back on Photoshop and then you rectify that mistake. So once you are done with the changes, all you have to do is you just have to bring in the new image, and you can drag and drop it on the old image, and it will replace it exactly. So you don't have to worry about um, having to like constantly change the image and it will ruin the layout and things like that, because it's a simple drag and drop process. Um, yeah, and it gives you various other options for creating different kinds of shapes. So there is a you can create circles, you can create polygons, you can specify how many sides of the polygon that you require. Just hold on. Uh, I don't know why I am not able to see the sides of the polygon. So the last time I made a polygon, it was a triangle because I had specified 3 sides. But I can't see that option anymore. I will just later check and tell you where that option is or why it isn't showing right now. But yeah, so you have your standard shapes and all of that within this. There is a gradient tool. So one important thing about InDesign is that since it's a publishing software, and we had spoken about this earlier as well, right? About the idea of the CMYK and RGB, right? So InDesign works on the format of the CMYK because it's a print aligned software. So the kind of colors that you see are generally the definitions of those colors are in CMYK, right? So it tells you, first it will give you the standard colors, which is the cyan, which is the C. So the C value is 100, which means so CMYK. So in a printer, there are 4 colors that get printed. One is the cyan, then there is magenta, there is yellow, and K, which is black. Okay, so it gives you those 4 values. 4 values. So you can see that for the second one, which is magenta, it's 100, and then the Y is 100 here for the yellow, and then the K is basically a full black color, and then all of the colors that you have will be created by a combination of this. All right, so it's a little complicated to get the colors because say I add a new swatch, and if I want to edit it, I actually have to give this. I have to actually specify how much of this value is going to be there. So one quick shortcut that I have is that I will generally use the color picker. So if I actually want, so if I'll keep a palette ready, which I require, and from where I can pick all of these colors, and I'll just simply use the color picker to basically give me that color. Right, so I just picked yellow from this image, and that is the yellow it has chosen to for the outline. So,
Alternatively, Kamlesh, can we also choose the color, like in Photoshop, where there they give you the CMYK and put those values here?
there is no easy sort of method to do that because there is no swatch palette sort of a thing available.
Okay.
Wait, let me just go into these options. So what it does is that it maintains a swatch palette that you have defined. So these were the colors that I created the last time I was working on a document. So it's showing me those only. So apart from the CMYK, it shows me the green that I had created and the blue that I had created. And then I had to specify exactly what those colors are. If you are working back and forth between Photoshop and this, the second easier thing is to basically go in Photoshop and then create a color that you want. And when you double click it, it tells you what is the CMYK value of it. So you can just quickly enter those parameters here and it gives you those colors. So generally with layouts, you will have only a set number of colors that you will use for the layout. Like you will have a palette ready because most of your images and everything have been worked on in Photoshop itself. Here you will have colors, like you will have colors for fonts, You'll have color for highlighting elements like the red box that I drew. You will have certain colors for outlines and things like that. You are not going to have, at least in your layout, some 15, 20 colors that you will be working on. That is the basic sense that the software functions on, that you will have a palette ready, you will have some 5, 6 colors that you will work with mostly. So it's good practice to specify those, so that it doesn't happen that every time the color changes. So the yellow is a little different, the blue is a little different, which can happen in Photoshop, but it's okay in Photoshop because those are raster images that you're working with. Here you want them to be very specific colors. So I'll just go into the other document. So one more thing that, yeah, so a lot of students tend to make this mistake of when they're composing sheets, is that they will create a text box, which is something like this. Actually, it doesn't. Let me change the color so you understand what I'm trying to say. So they will basically just start. They will make a text box, and they'll just start typing, or they'll just drop a text tool, and they'll just start typing in extremely long um, sort of sentences. The It ruins the legibility of the text, which is why it works with columns. If you guys have noticed that newspapers and magazines tend to use a column of a set size, that's because that's a comfortable width to read in, especially when you're working on sheets which are extremely large. You don't want people to start reading from one side of the sheet and go to the next side of the sheet. So it's good practice to always keep your text in thinner columns and in one place. And you can have multiple such things in various parts of your sheet, but try to keep the width limited to a standard column width. So for an A3, you can work with something like 3 or 4 column layouts. For larger documents like A0s and A1, you might have more. That's something that you will kind of understand as you keep working on these layouts. Okay, so in this particular document, I'll tell you what the various parts are, and I'll tell you what has been brought in from Photoshop and what has been inserted in InDesign. All right. So, the image which you see, which is this sort of isometric uh, model or a plan or a view, has been brought in from Photoshop. It was an export from SketchUp, and then it was rendered in Photoshop, and then this particular view was created, and then I brought it in. Everything other than those sort of images, so even this particular bubble that you see was created separately in Photoshop. It's a rectangular image, actually. If you see, if I double click, it shows the extent of the image. And then what I did is that I created a circular frame for it, and I inserted the image into that frame. So you can have such different shaped outlines for your images. Even these vectors that are created, which are symbolic, these circles again were created in Photoshop, and then the circular outline was created in InDesign. And then all of these arrows that you see, okay, I'll also show you how to do curved arrows here. So this pen tool helps you do that. So just like Photoshop, you have to click, and you have to click and press or hold. And then when you drag it out, it gives you the shape or the arc that you need to follow or you want to follow. So let's say I do something like this, and has created a curved line of 1 point width, which I can increase. I can then specify under stroke that I want, let's say, one end to be a pointer. and then I can actually create such leaders, and then I can show even these have been created in InDesign. And then, of course, the text has been typed into InDesign or copy and pasted into InDesign. Even these graphic elements that you see, which is basically talking about what is the topography of this image, which means that the central portion is higher and the buildings in this area are taller. So I've created these arrows in InDesign. This dotted line has been added in InDesign. This particular dimension line has been added in InDesign. And there are various texts which are placed in this. So the whole idea of adding these lines and vector elements, basically lines and text in InDesign, is that even at if you print at whatever size or quality, it doesn't get pixelated, it doesn't get distorted. Now you might be seeing that this particular image is extremely pixelated. Now that is actually not the case. That is something that InDesign does to save memory. So because you might be working with very high resolution images, and rendering them at the time that you are working with the images requires RAM, right? And InDesign is a very light software. It helps you process. You could be creating a double A0 sheet in InDesign, but it will work very fast because it's not pixel information. It's not raster information. So what it does to save the memory is that it will show you a lower quality version of this image, but when you actually export it, it will come as high quality. So this picture might be like a 5 MB, 7 MB picture that I created in Photoshop, but when I bring it into InDesign, it will reduce the quality just for the sake of showing me the extent of it. I'll just show you. So if I say display performance, I can actually say high quality display, and it will give me the full quality. Okay, but I don't want that because it will take a lot of memory and it will make my software run slower. And then you can basically add pages to this particular document. So it gives me a blank page. You can run through how many pages you have on the side like this. Okay. Now, of course, one very important thing that we do with our sheets is that we create some sort of a format, right? So let's say you are working with a portfolio which has 4 sheets, and every sheet will have a format, right? Which has your name, which has your class, it has the name of the project and things like that. And you don't want to keep pasting it in every sheet. You don't want to keep changing, like maybe you make it in one sheet and when you're copy pasting it, it gets a little distorted in the other one, a color changes or something like that. So what you do is that you actually edit the master. Okay, so on top it says A master, which means there's only one master, which is A. You can create many masters. There might be 2 masters which you want to create because you want 2 type of sheets to come in, right? So when you go into your master layout, it shows you a blank sheet. Now let's say I'm just very roughly adding things. I'm going to create a red box and I'll type in some random text. Okay, and when I go back into my sheet mode, you can see that it has applied that to all of my sheets as a background. So when you are basically starting off a new portfolio, what you can do is just edit a master so that when you start working on the sheet, you know exactly what parts of it are coming on top of your particular format, and you can be mindful of that, and you'll know that it's not an afterthought. Sometimes people create entire sheets and then बाद में से side में they'll create one small text box and put their name and their class and all of that. It's good practice to start it right at the beginning, understand what sort of a format you want for your sheet. You can even add graphic elements to your masters, maybe master slide. Maybe you want to have some images, maybe you want to add some graphics, and it will automatically add it to all of your sheets. Right. I think we had spoken yesterday also about finding certain small vectors that can help kind of quickly symbolize what a certain thing is. So because I wanted to say that this is a fort, and this particular idea will come in multiple sheets. Maybe in a plan I want to say it's a fort. Maybe in a section I want to say that that is the fort. So I have just created a graphic element for the fort, and then I can keep repeating it in any of these sheets. So you can have such vectors ready for that. You know that this thing is going to come in a lot of places, and you don't want to keep adding the text box. You don't want to keep typing it every single time. And sometimes it can be color coded also, so that um, once you've seen the legend, all of your drawings can be very easily read. So you can just quickly, or a professor or the juror can quickly go through your sheets like that, and just when they see those symbols, they'll know, okay, this is a park, or this is a water body that is there, this is a religious structure which is there, or there are 5 religious structures in this particular precinct. It becomes much easier, and you don't have to keep reading temple, temple, temple everywhere, right? Yeah, you can see that the image appears pixelated everywhere, but you know that it's actually not pixelated. Again, I've used the same symbol here for the fort. This is the symbol for a mosque that I used, so that I don't have to keep adding a label every time. I can quickly copy and paste it. So the idea of copy pasting is obviously the same as pretty much all the other softwares, which is that you can do a Control C, Control V. Um, I don't think that is much of a problem as design students. I think the standard things you would all understand and know. These are some of the very basic functionalities, and I don't think one requires um, any more to work with a basic layout of a sheet. There are very detailed sort of functions that InDesign offers. InDesign is the choice software for a lot of publishing houses creating and printing magazines. I have created entire magazines in InDesign, and it offers many more functionality. But these are something that are the basic that will help you get started with the layout. Are there any doubts or questions so far?
So can we create a custom column layout? So how particular can we get in the layout of the column?
So since this is, I think you can. I'm sure there are options for this. So you can just play around in the margins and columns. As a default, it does give me only a standard number of columns, so I can just specify how many of those I want, and it tells you the gutter in between. Um, but I think there should be an option. There should be an option. I've never actually worked with. So what I generally do is that if I want to, so I work with multiple grids, right? So let's say if I want, if I create a 5-column layout, and if I want certain things to be larger, I will just occupy 2 columns. Instead of making 1 column wider, I'll actually just occupy 2 columns. It doesn't stop you from actually doing that. So I can have different sizes. The column grid is only for reference. It tells you when you are going out of it because you can see those lines, but it doesn't stop you from going according to your own particular widths. So what I do is that I understand how many column widths are going to be required, and then if I do want something to be longer or large, wider or something, I will just use two columns instead of one. So it still fits into the grid.
I'm not very conversant with InDesign, but one way might we can we adjust the color of these columns to make them lighter, and then what could be done is to add your own grid lines to make
Actually, you could just
whatever
not
you
add.
want.
Actually, you could just like not add columns, and what you can do is simply by using the ruler, if you understand what your sheet size is, just drag in those guides and use those guides as column. So I think that's a quick way of overriding the standard column system.
So the default four columns is not necessary to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, then Jai, I think you can make your own grid however you want with like we do in CAD or Photoshop.
In fact, this particular sheet I made it actually very roughly. Um, I actually didn't even use columns here, so you can see that it only gives me a margin, okay, which is a pink purple line running on the side. There are no columns in this particular document because I was sort of very haphazardly arranging the elements. And then if I wanted to, I could have just brought in these guides from the ruler and I could have made my own column grid because it tells me the size of the sheet anyway on top in inches and on the side. Any other doubts? Any other questions?
Sir, there is an option for transparent the image, like for a
Um,
background of a sheet or anything.
I didn't understand. What do you mean?
Like we have to transparent the image for a background of a sheet. Like we do not have to put a white sheet. So there is any option.
Um, as a default, it does create a white sheet because, like I said, it's a publishing software. You will generally work with paper, which is white paper. Um, Again, that is something I've not done. So what I generally do if I want a colored printout or a very large one, I will just simply draw a large rectangle over my sheet and I'll give it a color.
I think what is doubt is can we adjust the transparency of any image?
Yeah.
Oh, transparency of the image.
So
You can
then
just
he
simply
can
remove
make it as a
the.
background if he wants to.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So you can just go under effects and you can reduce the opacity. Did you see that?
Yeah. Same as Photoshop. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Um, okay, you are asking that doubt, but generally try not to do that. Um, it doesn't look very good. It distracts the observer from a lot of things. Don't keep images as backgrounds. वो थोड़ा amateur भी लगता है. It doesn't look very good. If you want to have certain background, you can have them as colors or things like that. Don't keep any images because it's very jarring to look at. Especially a very large sheet, you might think you have um, a good quality image, but sometimes it pixelates and then you have these weird pixels in the background. You
Usually,
lock.
usually people use background images. They are usually the ones who are not related to graphic fields, like or even design fields. So you see a lot of times actually they do it just to create some effect or vibrancy to the sheet. but that is not what we are aiming for. Usually in graphics or in design, we use the presentation to add clarity to what we design. So the sheet, more than the sheet, I think the content is important for us. You might see it in MBA colleges wherein PPT has a background or things like that, but I don't think we do that. But
Yeah,
it is possible if you want to do it.
it's better to just have a format. Himani, hope you saw what I just did. Your question was, can we lock objects? I simply right clicked on an image and you can say lock. So it locks it in place. So then it doesn't accidentally move around when you are working on things. Like this is not a locked image, so I can move it around, but I can lock it in place if I want to. There is no command for the master. Um, it's just a double click. So it gives you the master on top, right? So if you just double click it, you go into the master sheet and you can edit it, you can change your format. And when you double click back onto the sheet, you come back into the sheet mode. And objects on the master are not editable in the page view. So, you don't have to worry about constantly moving your format around or something like that. You can also create different type of masters or different number of masters. So I can create a new master, and that can be, instead of A master, it will be B master, and I can have a different format. And then you can specify to your sheets ki ispe kaun sa master lagna hai, right? So right now all of the sheets have the same master, but I can go to apply master to pages, and I can select which master I want to apply to a particular sheet. The under apply master. If we use a grid, do we have a snap command? This is not AutoCAD, but when you move things around, वो automatically उसके साथ align हो जाता है. It will get close to the line, it will stick to it. That is there. There is no snap, but you can tell when it is fitting into the.
Usually when it overlaps perfectly, you will see a slight change in the line of the
Line
box.
as well. Yeah.
So that is your clue.
I mean, once you start working in InDesign, you will understand while working what are the sort of hints that the software gives you for all these things. While you're working and you're moving things around, वो अपने आप समझ में आता है कि is it snapping, is it fitting, all of that thing happens.